Dude, thank you very much for joining me today.
hmm
Obviously, it's pretty awesome because I had Eli Knight on earlier last week, and
Yeah,
he
my
mentioned,
doppelganger.
yeah, and he mentioned you, and he said how that you created because Jiu Jitsu, but
Because Jitsu, yep.
no one really knows the fact that you're very involved in Jiu Jitsu yourself.
Yeah, it's hilarious when I interact with people that like the page that don't know the admin,
Yeah.
and they're surprised to find out that I'm actually a black belt in jujitsu.
Yeah. So how did he actually start the because Jiu Jitsu?
Well, for starts, it's because jitsu. I dropped the Jew on it just as a lull. But it started really just out of frustration, to be honest. When I was a purple belt, there was a lot of political bullshit I was dealing with, inter-gym, inter-affiliation shit. And it was, I guess, my sort of introvert, sardonic way of getting back at jujitsu. I started just poking fun at it. And the numbers started picking up, like people were enjoying it. I was like, oh, well, this is actually kind of fun. And then it sort of morphed into something else where we just sort of laugh at ourselves. And
Right.
yeah, it's been
So
going on for about 5 years.
5 years. I was gonna say because there's a good 5,000 posts on there now, right? So
hmm
that's been going on for a while. So is it just you behind all the meme creation?
Yep, that's just me.
Wow. Where'd you get the inspiration from, bro? Like,
Well, I mean, I don't really know because I can only ever see reality from my lens. And from my lens, it doesn't seem that hard. I guess other people say making memes is hard, but for me, it's really, really simple. So it's actually like very low effort, lazy bullshit from my end. So I
right.
feel like it's hard to be like, well, my artistic inspiration strikes me at noon. And, it's like I'll just see a picture and be like, that'd be funny.
Well, so you're rolling. You just kind of think, yeah,
Oh
this is a
yeah.
meme.
Yeah,
This is
it
a
takes
meme.
all of 2 to 5 minutes to make and throw it up there.
And so that just blew off like the because it's a very niche kind of
hmm hmm
market, right? Like
Yeah,
not many
niche is,
people
is
will
good and
appreciate
bad.
not many people appreciate what you're actually saying, unless you're
Yeah,
actually in the jiu-jitsu scene.
well, it's good for getting the right followers because they're generally the only ones that get it. But it is kind of a strange compliment when I get somebody that doesn't do jujitsu say that they really enjoyed that. And I'm like, you shouldn't even
Yeah.
understand that. They're like, no, I get, but the wording, it was funny. I'm like, okay,
Right.
cool. That's kind of
Right.
a tip of the hat.
Yeah. And so is it all literally from your phone? You just literally just go, right, I'm
Oh
gonna
yeah.
write that down, and it
Oh
and it
yeah,
becomes a thing.
it's internet culture right from the phone. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is something that I had to learn like a year or two into it because everybody watches these bigger pages. They got some sort of meme page that they love, and they got millions of followers and stuff. And I got to remind myself every now and again, all it is just a guy with a phone. Like that's
Yeah.
it. There's no. I mean, there are some companies that try to like corporatize it, but it's very obvious that they're
Right.
just regurgitating the same meme that's been on Reddit for the last month. But all of the original creators is just some dude with a phone.
It's fantastic, isn't it? Really. So, obviously, I wanted to get you on the show because the whole point of Fuse Control podcast is to kind of understand from black belts' perspective how they started their journey.
hmm
So for me, I'm just starting out. Like I started out in January, so
Oh,
it's
damn.
just it's an awesome. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, bro. I really
Sweet. Well,
appreciate it.
what brought you from, I guess, 3 or 4 months ago from starting jujitsu to being locked down from jujitsu to podcasting jujitsu? That's
Right.
quite a
It's
light speed journey in itself.
it's been crazy, and for me, I was just kind of recording my instructor do what he does, and kind of just sharing it with the world, sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
And now I'm kind of being a bit more creative and interviewing people from around the world, and it's just been really enlightening experience, especially for someone that starts out the journey. It's been really cool,
Mhm.
man. So would you mind just going back to like where you began, like right with the start, and why
Sure.
you started journey?
Well, to put it into proper perspective, I've got to lay out the landscape of where I am and when I started in regards to it. So I'm in Alberta, Canada, which is uh, a province in the country of Canada with a population of somewhere between 3 to 5 million people total.
Wow.
So it's actually larger than the landmass of Germany and smaller than the population of New York.
Right.
So it's a lot of rural environment. There's a couple city centers, but I didn't live in them. I lived in the one sort of in between those two. So when I got into jiu-jitsu, I had to look it up in the yellow pages in 2007. And there was precisely one advertisement for a jiu-jitsu gym, and it was run out of a guy's garage. So it was the absolute Wild West. It was the stories you hear from like the 1990s in California kind of thing. This is where that scene was at that time. So I started in 2007. I had done martial arts before. I'd done karate. I had done some Kali, which is Filipino stick fighting. None of it was ever, I guess the efficacy was always in question. In karate, you always pulled your punches and kicks because you're supposed to. So you're like, well, I could have got you, but I didn't. That's how good I am. And it never really resonated. And then with stick fighting, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, well, I could have smacked you in the face with a stick, but
Yeah.
nobody wants to get smacked in the face with a stick. So if I need to smack somebody with a stick, now I know how. So it always had that aftertaste of like, this is all theoretical. And then I had a friend who did a little bit of jujitsu. He had taken like 2 weeks of training, coincidentally at the place that I ended up going to, and then quit. But he was my only friend that knew anything at the time. So he was like the god of jujitsu as far as I knew. He knew how to do an armbar. He knew how to do a triangle. He knew how to do a rear naked choke. And so he could kill us all. Like we'd do trampoline wrestling. Well, I was like 20 years old at this point. I'd go over to his house and we'd
Yeah.
wrestle on the trampoline and goof around, and he'd just kill us all. So, but there was one move in Kali that they used for a disarm that's unbeknownst to me was an actual lock called,
Right.
they called it a hammer lock, which was an Americana. And we were goofing around one day, and it was the only thing that I knew how to do on the ground is I just grabbed onto his wrist and figure four his grip and pulled his arm backwards, and he tapped. And I was like, oh shit, this is
Yeah.
real. This
Right.
is, he tapped when he didn't want to. Like this is, you can't fake that. So I was immediately hooked. The next day I was looking in the yellow pages for somewhere to teach me how to do this. And I ended up at that place. I was there for about a decade before I took off on my own to start my own school. And that's about it.
Wow. So in terms, because obviously you came from like a striking background, do you
Mm.
think for someone that started off, do you think it's quite important to have that kind of background of even if it's karate or stick fighting? Do you think, because obviously in the streets, if you're purely grappling, right, is it
Mhm.
is it do you not need to have some sort of striking background?
There's a couple things you could say to that. So first of all, what you're learning it for is always important. Are you learning this for self-defense? Are you learning this for fitness? Are you learning this for sport? The answer to that question will inform a different direction on that answer. But for myself, I find now, because it's easier to look back retrospectively as a coach and seeing other people coming into my academy now with striking backgrounds, and what does it benefit them when they're learning a style that they don't know. And it's not so much their balance, and it's not so much their athleticism, but what I find is really the advantage to anybody who's learned a martial art to any extent before coming in here to learn this one is they know how to learn. So they've gone to enough classes, they understand the structure of learning a new technique and trying to implement it. That is noticeably different between somebody who's never done that, who's like was on the football team or used to, um, play some sport, got out of it, got fat, and came in for some fitness, having to learn techniques, as opposed to some guy who did Taekwondo when he was 7 until he was 9, but now he's 30. He actually knows how to learn better. So it actually shortens the learning curve for them. Even though it's all alien still, the techniques, understanding how to learn them is its own skill.
So, because obviously you run an academy now, so
Mhm.
you how do you mean by learning to learn? So
Yeah,
does it come under like ego and mindset, or is it kind of something else?
partially. Partially has to do with the old adage of emptying the cup, right? Of if you picture your knowledge base as a cup that you fill up with something, once it's full, you can't add anything else. So you'll get some people that that actually works counter because they won't empty their cup, right? They come in with a black belt in karate and they know martial arts and they're there to show you how good they are. They
Right.
can't really learn until they give that up. Thankfully, because jiu-jitsu is real, there's no argument. They hit the mats, they get the shit kicked out of them by a white belt girl, and then they have to be like, okay, I got to learn some of this stuff. But knowing how to learn in the martial arts sense is pretty universal from style to style. Even if you're a student in a no-touch key Chinese bullshit art where it's like, I'm going to push you over from 10 feet away, having the I guess mental wherewithal to be the student is its own path. And like I said, it can be a longer path for somebody who isn't used to that. For example, you'll get people coming into your academy, even though you're the black belt instructor, who are surgeons, who are police officers, who are high ranked in their own discipline, who aren't used to being talked down to, who aren't used to taking orders, who aren't used, they have to change their mindset. And it's one of those things, by attrition will happen eventually. But if you come in with a student mindset already, it makes that situation much easier and faster and less grinding on your body and your mind.
So for starting off, having the ability to be taught is really important.
Yes, it's something that everybody has to learn anyways. If you come in with a base level of that already, it's going to help. But it's like nobody sticks around who can't do that, because the people who can't do that don't stick around because they keep getting the shit kicked out when it doesn't get better.
So you see a lot of people come and go sort of thing,
yes,
as an instructor. Yeah.
There's a misnomer, or sorry, there's a misunderstanding in jiu-jitsu where they say that jiu-jitsu is for everyone. That's marketing. That's not true.
Right.
And you'll
how would you mean by
as
that?
a gym. Oh, jiu-jitsu can be for everyone because we all run the same hardware. We're all running the same body, right? So it does apply to everyone, but personality will dictate if it's for you. There are some people that are cripplingly claustrophobic that will absolutely not do jiu-jitsu. They can't. There's some people who are cripplingly egotistical and they can't. These narcissists, where if they can't come in and be Joe Alpha right away, they're not sticking around. And you can't be good at jiu-jitsu without sticking around. So it's not for everyone. But the good news to that is the people that do stick around, they're the best people and the people you want anyways.
Sure. So can you basically gauge, say if there's someone new joins your academy for sort of thing, can you tell straight away if they're going to stick around, or does it kind of come out in stages?
No, it's something that you can see usually within the first month. Firstly, with how consistent they are. If they came for the first class and don't come back for 6 weeks, then it's probably like, yeah, they're teetering on just never coming back, or they just never will. But if they're coming consistently, that's the first indication that it's going to be for them, because they're finding something that they want to come back for. And usually that's not, I'm doing so good at this. That's almost never why. It's usually because they're not doing good at it, but they have the personality to be like, I could be good at this, or I want to be good at this, or I want to be less bad at this. And those sort of, I guess if you put it into like a video game analogy, they're the ones that would go into an RPG and be the grinders. They're going to grind their XP up until they can beat the boss. They're not going to go in there and be like, wow, I can't beat the boss. This game sucks.
Right. And do they even get to blue belt before that even happens?
Hopefully not. I wouldn't put a blue belt on somebody that wasn't already at that stage for a while.
Right.
Usually between 0 to 2 stripes, they'll have that figured out. And that's usually between like 0 to 12 months.
Right. Yeah. So in terms of the pandemic and everything, bro, like how have you reacted to that as a gym? Are you the owner of the gym?
Yeah. We shut down a week before we were mandated to by the government. So I feel like we were proactive in that. That was not an easy choice to make. I know a lot of gyms that were waiting till the bitter end, till the government literally told them they aren't allowed to.
That's right.
But I know enough people within my inner circle, within my family, within my close relatives that are in that danger category, and enough people that trained at our gym that also either are themselves or directly related to people that could be severely affected by this type of virus. And it's just something that I was not willing to take a risk on. I don't want to be that guy's like, well, we stuck in there till the bitter end and Jake's grandma died, so it was a hard choice to make. It was the right one to make, and we're hanging in there right now. Nobody knows exactly when it's going to end. Our provincial government went on the record earlier last week talking about it may not be till June. So a lot of gyms are struggling right now with no income. My landlord isn't giving me any relief on that, so I'm still paying him thousands of dollars a month that I'm not making back. It's one of those things, man. Like, everybody's hurting, and it will show people's true grit, like the people that survive this thing, school owners, they're going to be the ones that were going to do well anyways.
Have you had any government kind of support in terms of that?
There is some personal relief funds that I've applied for just as myself, not as the academy, that are helping. There's been some deferral of mortgages and stuff that has really helped. But there's loans that you can apply for as a business that I'm not really thrilled about trying to take on another loan. So yeah. I'd rather not.
Of course. Well, I messaged you earlier, and you were saying about how you've kind of put the classes online now, right? Like live videos.
To an extent, yeah. I know a lot of academies are trying to do this in one way, shape, or another. We're kind of helping to support the Zoom Corporation as Jiu Jitsu as a whole right now, because everybody's jumping on there for online classes. But my situation is I don't have any adults to train with that are close enough to my circle that wouldn't be like intermixing a bunch of family circles. So I can only run kids classes right now with my own kids. So we do that a few times a week. The kids at home, they tune in and they can watch it back and practice at home with a dummy or with their parent or something. So that's all we can do at the moment.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because a lot of people kind of, especially gym owners, are starting to put their courses online, right? Mm-hmm. So like online seminars and that sort of thing. And I saw that you had like an online series as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've got a pay-to-play series that's based off of a certain grip called the Reverse Kimura that I made earlier this year, thankfully, before this thing hit. So I had something digitally to sell, which is, that's one of the things that I think businesses in general right now are either thankful for or wish that they had done, is have some sort of digital product, because it's the only part of the market that's still vibing right now. Like Amazon's never been healthier, but all the brick and mortar stores are really hurting. So I had that going for me, thankfully. That's about it though. Like, as far as digital sales content is concerned, it's just the one series, because I was pretty new to it before this thing hit. I have plans for more, but in the meantime, it's just that.
Yeah. Well, so you just kind of got like did you actually get a full camera like set up and everything like that? Like
I've got a photographer friend, so cool. He helped me shoot it. We caught it from a couple different angles, and I did the editing on it, and it turned out pretty good.
Awesome.
Yeah. I've got a YouTube page for Because Jitsu. It's all just techniques that I've been doing for like the last year. So that's up there. It's free for everybody. So you can go check that out, Because Jitsu on YouTube. There's a whole bunch of stuff on there. So I had a certain amount of equipment already bought for that helped lead into that series.
Yeah. Well, I'll check that out, bro, for sure. That sounds cool. So another thing I wanted to ask you, bro, is you started a podcast.
Oh yeah. We're rocking right now. It's one of the golden times for podcasts.
Bro, Eli was telling me about it. It sounds fucking well. I've watched a few, but you're getting some serious guests on there, right?
Yeah.
You've got Eddie Bravo, and here on
we got
Gracie,
Kenny
man.
Florian here on Gracie. We've got Tate Fletcher. We just interviewed Greg Jackson last week.
Yeah.
Lots of people. Both have been recorded. We got 19 episodes out there right now, including one with Eli on it. And lots in the bank right now too. So it's a good time for podcasts. And
Oh,
yeah,
for sure.
definitely check it out. It's called Rear Naked Radio. We
Yeah.
got it on all of the podcast mediums, so whatever you're running, as well as YouTube.
But I was just like, how on earth have you got all these people on your podcast? Like, do
This
you
is the
have like
thing is,
like an inside some sort of thing?
between me and my co-host, we've got a pretty extensive black book of content contacts. So in the 5 years that I've been running this page, it's blown up to be the biggest of its kind on Instagram. So there's a lot of these people that just follow it already. That I can just directly DM and be like, hey, if you got time this week, blah, blah, blah. And we just sort of, cast the net out there and see who's available, as well as my co-host, Jamie Kilstein. He's a professional comedian who's been doing that for about 20 years. So he's got all the inroads to celebrities, as well as comics and producers and a whole bunch of people that other people wouldn't have access directly to.
Yeah.
He's got like their personal text numbers, and he's chatting with them, back and forth, and like exchanging podcast appearances on each other's podcasts.
Yeah.
So we got some advantages for sure.
Because I saw Jamie did a podcast with Joe Rogan.
Oh yeah, he's done a couple. He's been on the JRE a couple times. I mean, he's done sets with him a number of times. He's right in that scene with the Comedy Store guys. So we've got, like, I'm trying to get some of his jiu-jitsu related comedy friends like Russell Peters and Russell Brandt and some of these other people that are like a blue belt in jiu-jitsu but do comedy, to sort of catch that crossover demographic. Like one of the things that I wanted to do from the beginning was get people that are what I consider jiu-jitsu adjacent. So they do jiu-jitsu. It's not their full-time gig, and people know them from something else. That to me is super interesting. So we've had people like Karen Bryant, who's one of the UFC correspondents on there. She was really good. We've got people like Tate Fletcher, who's, although he had his UFC time and people know him as a fighter, he's more known as an actor right now. He's been on like Jumanji and worked with The Rock, and you see him in all these stunt situations. That was fun to get his input. We've got like a lot of different people. We've got in touch with musicians that you would know, actors, and those are the ones that, besides, like, look, what I don't enjoy listening to BJJ podcasts personally is the same thing over and over. We got so-and-so world champion who's tell us about how you started jiu-jitsu, tell us about when you won the world championship. All right, next guest, next world champion. And it's like, okay, well, there's only so many answers to the same question.
That's right. And that's something I kind of wanted to ask you about, because I'm worried about going on the same avenue where it's literally the same sort of question. What's your favorite this? What's your favorite that? And it becomes very monotonous, especially for the audience point of view. They kind of think, well, this is a structure for the podcast, and this is what we expect, and this is what's going to happen next, right? So
there's a couple different ways that you can deal with that, because that is a problem, and it's good that you're identifying that early. Because you'll be drowned out in the doldrum mix of all these other ones that are doing the same thing.
For sure.
There's a couple ways you can deal with it. Either one is, you're getting interesting guests that aren't the cookie cutter formula. Even though, like, man, if you got Marcelo Garcia, that's a good get, but you just had Braulio Estima last week, and then you had Damian Maia the week before that. And they're all going to sound very similar in the same, because their paths are similar, right? It's just kind of their own personal flavor on the same thing. But it's good to get different guests of different life experiences for that reason. Also, setting up your podcast in a predictable segment orientation is good for the fans. They know what's coming. They're expecting it. It's not like, oh, this is the same old thing. It's like, well, this is what this part of the segment is. We're doing the question and answer segment, or we're doing the technique question segment, or whatever it is. That's something that will sort of inform the audience and make them not as bored. And then the last thing, which is really what me and Jamie are trying to do, and I think what sets us apart right now, is trying to make it entertainment instead of just information. So even though we got information coming in that's really good, really cool stuff, like we got Carlos Condit, we got Boogie on there, we got a bunch of stuff that's like super interesting. We want to flavor it all with our own personality, so that no matter who's on the podcast, just listening to us talk to them or us talk to us is interesting enough to keep people entertained.
Sure, and it is definitely an advantage that Jamie's a comedian, right? Because
Hmm.
obviously you've got the vast knowledge of Jiu Jitsu, but he's got knowledge of Jiu Jitsu, and also he's got the kind of the the comedic kind of outlook of it. And obviously you're a funny dude as well, but
Yeah, we kind of got the same thing, but from different avenues. So like he's a brown belt that did mostly no gi. I'm a black belt that did mostly gi. So we got kind of
right,
two views of the same thing there. And he's a professional comedian, and I'm an internet comedian. So kind of two
yeah,
views of the same thing there.
yeah,
It's a fun little mashup.
for sure. So, what is your favorite guest that you've had on so far?
I think, well, Greg Jackson, just because it's fresh in my brain, he's a lot of fun because
Yeah,
me and him,
he had a
we have a
lot of
very
different
similar
interesting.
vibe.
He has an interesting perspective on a lot of things, right? Like,
Hmm. Yeah, you can ask him a question and you're going to get an answer you've never heard before, which is really
yeah,
interesting. He's very philosophical and he's thought this through 10 layers deeper than most people, which was fun. And then I think the other one that I personally enjoyed the most was Tate Fletcher, who he's kind of the same thing, but he's a man of the world. So he's had a lot of life experience that flavors any question that you give him. Like he'll go super deep, super personal on just a very simple question, and then it gets like really interesting.
yeah. And do you and Jamie find it? It's quite funny because you different parts of the world, right? Is he in America?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. He's down in Arizona.
And you co-host him. How do you find that?
Um, I mean, there's always going to be struggles trying to find the coordinating times between me and him, and then between me, him, and the guests. So, I mean, it's a struggle. But the thing is that we're both committed to it, so we're both willing to make concessions here and there just to make it work because it's worth it.
Yeah. Are you literally going for the big names now? You know,
Well,
in
this
terms
is
of
the
your
thing is we're
podcast.
still, I feel like it's been going on forever because it's been months that we've been doing it, but really we're only on episode 20. So we're still pretty new to the scene. And so we
Yeah.
want to sort of get that shock and awe with guests that will turn people's heads, even if they don't know who we are.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're going for the big names for that reason alone right now. Eventually we'll get to the point where we can just have enough listenership and viewership, no matter who's on, that we can sort of free form it a little more the way that Joe Rogan does. Like people just tune in for Joe Rogan. Whoever's
Yeah.
on is whoever's
That's
on.
right. That's right. And he gets to the fact where he kind of learns so much about of different articles and that sort of thing, that he can kind of improvise, right?
Mhm.
Is that something that you focus on as well, a lot as well?
Yeah, man, like being a podcast host is a lot more difficult than a lot of people think.
Yeah,
It's its own skill, and it's something that I'm still getting good at.
yeah,
Jamie's had a lot more experience at it than I have. So I'm I'm glad that I've got him on board because
yeah,
he helps coach sort of before and after segments, like how'd that one go, what could we have changed, and he has a lot of good insights on that. But it is, I mean, like anything, if you're going to get good at something, you got to put the
you have
effort
to
in. It
try it.
doesn't necessarily come naturally.
That's right. You have to try it. Like at the end of the day, it might go bad. It might go very well.
Hmm.
That's a risk you've got to be willing to take, right?
Hmm.
Like, what I was going to ask you in terms of the storytelling and that sort of thing. You have to work on storytelling and putting your perspective across in an
Yeah.
interesting way that will resonate with people. Because
Hmm.
then 15 clip videos that you can get of the interview, that they're normally some of the best content,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it is nice having a co-host for that reason because you can bounce sort of personalities off each other, which makes it interesting. Sometimes, if all you have is you and a guest, you're pretty reliant on that guest to be interesting. If
Correct.
they're not, it can make you seem not interesting because they're just not
Yeah,
in it, right?
yeah, exactly. And so I feel like the lesson to be learned is to basically read up on a little about a lot, right? And so
Hmm.
if someone brings a topic up, you can just go, oh yeah, I know about that, and then just go off on a
Well,
tangent.
being the interviewer doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be knowledgeable. What you have to do is lead them in directions that make them express their knowledge. So like listening is a skill that's very important
Yeah.
for interviewing, is just like putting a little seed out there and then letting them sprout it for you, and then you can talk about the leaves that came off it as they start sprouting, you know.
Yeah. What fascinates me about Joe Rogan is the fact that he can he's so curious about everything that
Mm-hmm.
when someone says something, he goes, well, why?
Yes.
Why is it that you think that? And he really, like you say, he makes them go really into it.
Yeah, you know what? He is responsible for my own thought process nowadays. Like before I started listening to him, which was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, um, I had my own worldviews that I would kind of stuck to because they're the ones I grew up with. And he was the first, uh, I guess, mentor, even though I don't know the guy,
Yeah.
because he's in your brain so often. I just have him on earbuds 3 hours a day for
Yeah.
5 days a week, you know? So you are kind of picking up something from that. And he just by osmosis of the way that he's curious and would ask questions, not as a way to force his own opinion, but to hear the other person's, it made me a lot more interested and open to other people's ideas, that I think has made me much more of a centrist when it comes to any sort of opinion, which I think is something that the world needs more of right now. Is there's a lot of
Yeah.
people that are hyper opinionated about shit they don't know just because that's what their team says. And that's like the grossest taste in my mouth right now. If I start talking to people that are, you know, pick whatever hot topic it is, and they're just going to start spitting out headlines that they've seen on whatever gossip they have going across their feed, I got no time for that. It's so uninteresting. I'm like, I don't care what other people think. What do you think? Like, let's
Yeah.
go down the actual thought process here.
And the ability to kind of spin on what you think as well. So if
For
for
sure.
example, you have like an opinion set in stone, right?
Mm,
And then someone has a good point, you think, actually, yeah, that's a very good point. Maybe I could think about it that way. And
yeah.
that's what makes a good podcast host. Like being able to bring people on the show that you don't necessarily agree with, but you go, oh,
Hmm.
actually, I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, or at least allowing them to put their thoughts out there for themselves. So if you have somebody that you're bringing on, like you said, that you may not agree with, or you know there's certain things you don't agree with, you've never actually talked to them to have them express it back to you. And sometimes it comes out differently than you thought it would when they do that. You're like, oh, they've thought about this a little more than I have. Or vice versa. Maybe they haven't thought about it, and them expressing it is like, well, you're missing all this, and this. And
Yeah,
they're like,
yeah.
you know, then they have to play with those thoughts.
Sure, absolutely. Well, dude, I'm very conscious of your time. Obviously, you've got a live stream in the next few
Mm.
minutes or so. So I just wanted to say a big thank you for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts and everything like that. If people do want to get in contact with yourself, where would they be able to find you?
Yeah, no problem. So the easiest way would be to, let me think here. I've got so many different ways to get a hold of me is the problem right
You've
now. So
got
I
a
got to think
whole
about, yeah. Like obviously you can follow because_jitsu on Instagram. You can hit me up on Rear Naked Radio on Instagram. There are emails associated with both of those, but really just like we're pumping out content every day, every week on all of those mediums. And yeah, if you got anything pressing you need to get a hold of me, throw it in the DMs and I'll try to get around to it.